Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of Season 3 of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I am your host, Melissa Whitecross, coming to you live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Welcome back to all of our regular viewers and a big hello to any new viewers tuning in.
Yes, hello, Andrew de Block here, your second host for the evening. Tonight's show is a trip down memory lane, which will be sure to give those of you lucky enough to join us on the Flock to Marion Voyage. And for those of you who are unable to join us, this will be a chance to see some of the fun that we had on board this once-in-a-lifetime trip.
And I'm Christina Hagen, down from Cape Town. So we love hearing from you, and please use the hashtags Conservation Conversations on all major social media channels, and let us know what you think of the show. Okay, let's get into tonight's webinar. Many of us online tonight were forever changed after the life-altering experience that was Flock to Marion. And we were lucky enough to have several of the BirdLife South Africa staff on board, including our new communications manager, Andy Wassung. And he joined BirdLife South Africa in January 2022, just before the voyage. So he was thrown into the deep end, as it were. Andy is responsible for the organization's internal and external marketing, media, and communication, including website administration, newsletters, social media, media relations, etc. Andy caught the birding bug age 7 when his family moved to the shores of the Zambezi River. He has a Bachelor of Journalism and Media Studies from Rhodes University and 11 years of experience in marketing and communications. He is passionate about creating compelling multimedia stories that inspire the next generation of conservationists. And I must say, working with him in the short time that he's been at BirdLife has been incredible, and we look forward to what you get up to in future, Andy. So tonight, the 3 Conservation Conversations hosts, and Melissa, Andrew, and I, will join Andy in reminiscing about the cruise. So let's dive in.
Yeah, as the team has mentioned, first time on Conservation Conversations on this side of the camera. So it's nice to be with the hosts, and the hosts I've been watching for many months and probably over a year. Just the other day I was watching these webinars just like everyone here, and now I have the privilege of being on this side and finding myself teaming up with Melissa, Andrew, and Christina. And as Christina mentioned, what a privilege to have started not just started a BirdLife South Africa, but started 10th of January this year, just a week or two before we set sail for Prince Edward Islands. So it definitely was thrown into the deep end, but what a deep end it was, and what a privilege. And for me, a special privilege because most of my birding growing up, as the team mentioned, was around the Zambezi, Botswana, and obviously one of my favorites, the Kruger National Park. So a lot of bushveld birding. And needless to say, prions, petrels, diving petrels, and storm petrels were all very, very new to me, as I'm sure many of them were to all of you as well. But wasn't Flock to Marion the ultimate masterclass in seabirding? So what an opportunity to learn about all these species, and to have been on this amazing voyage with many of you. And those of you who didn't join us, don't worry, there's always next time. And we are in the workings, but we can't reveal anything just yet. So on the next slide, I think we've already touched on the chat room seems to already be quite active. So thank you so much for all the engagement and interactions there. Many of you I know have been on previous flocks, and thank you so much for sharing your most memorable moments. So I wanted to start just with exactly what is a flock, especially to those of you who couldn't join us or didn't join us. What exactly are these flocks at sea? Now, BirdLife has done 2 of these already. 2013 voyage was between Walvis Bay and Cape Town, and the 2017 voyage was from Cape Town to the edge of the continental shelf, so the edge of our continent shelf, at which point the depth of the sea really drops down to anything between 5,000 and 6,000 kilometers. So those were both 4-night voyages. Obviously, Flock to Marion was a bit longer, and both of those voyages stayed within Southern Africa. So especially listers who keep Southern Africa lists could add species to their lists on those voyages. And the point really of these, as you can see from 2013 and Flock at Sea again 2017, were AGMs, so annual gathering of members of BirdLife South Africa, or the annual general meeting. And also to bring together a community of birders, which many of you would have really felt on Flock to Marion. And also to have an incredible experience out at sea with the seabirds and with each other, and to have a little bit of fun in the process as well. Both of these voyages were pretty unique, as you can imagine, if you weren't on them. But there was a need, and we were inspired to take things to the next level. And so the thinking caps went on as early as 2019, actually, and Flock to Marion was planned. So Melissa, you can go off to the next slide. I can see you on it now. Thank you. So MSC Cruises, the partner that we worked with in 2013 and 2017, was engaged in 2019. As you all very aware, the pandemic, the global pandemic that ravaged the whole world, brought events like this, especially unprecedented events, to the likes of Marion or Prince Edward Islands to a halt. So there were lots of struggles, lots of patience, a pandemic to manage, but somehow the team, kept on, and the good cause of bird conservation really, I think, got everyone through. And somehow the team has pulled it off. Here we sit now back on dry land, sadly, a month or so now that we've been back. And we really want to thank all of you who were with us on this voyage, for staying with us on that journey, and for staying the course, as they say. It was a long time coming, over 2 years in the making, and it was postponed, as many of you know. It was changed a few times, from a Durban departure to a Cape Town departure. We eventually got all the way to Cape Town, after those of us who managed to pass PCR tests and antigen testing. MSC Cruises had to stick by those global recommendations to make sure that everyone was safe. And then the Cape Doctor, as many of you will note, the southeasterly in Cape Town made things even more difficult, when high winds threatened to postpone the voyage, or the embarkation even further, because of the narrow port at the Cape Town cruise terminal, making it quite difficult for a cruise ship the size of the MSC Orchestra to get in and out. And so that was another challenge, that was another curveball that was thrown our way. And as you'll see in some of the pictures later on, we did eventually get the cruise ship out on time before the winds came up, and managed to get all the passengers on board, some of them through tugboats or tender boats afterwards, while we enjoyed the 12 Apostles view. And then why Marion? So, Flock to Marion, like I said, take things to a new level. Marion Island is South African territory, so it also gives listers the opportunity to add some very incredible species that we wouldn't see around the mainland to South African lists. And also it's an island in the Southern Ocean, the southern subantarctic island, and islands in that Southern Ocean make up 1% of the Southern Ocean is land, or islands where seabirds can actually breed and nest. So you can just imagine, those of you who didn't join us, the kind of explosion of life out there in the middle of nowhere, really, halfway to Antarctica, about just over 2,000 kilometers, or 1,500 nautical miles from Cape Town. On this island are about 2 million different seabirds, representing 28 different species. So the opportunity to see some of these species around the islands, like I said, you wouldn't get it around Cape Town or the mainland, was there, and that was obviously one of the driving factors. And then, of course, to have a community of birders come with us on this amazing once-in-a-lifetime voyage. It was a first for MSC Cruises as well to go along this route, and a first for BirdLife to go that far on a flock as well. You can see on the next slide some of the route less traveled. You can see the size of this vessel. I'm sure many of you have been on cruise ships before. For someone like myself, I hadn't actually done, like I said, much pelagic birding or sea birding. On top of that, I hadn't been on a cruise ship this size, so it was all pretty incredible. And you can see our bird lasser day-by-day log. So obviously leaving Cape Town on Monday, the 24th of January, making our way over the continental shelf on the morning of the 25th. The 26th of January was the Wednesday. We were about halfway to the Marion or Prince Edward Islands. And then we spent most of the 27th and some of the 28th around there. And you can see on BirdLife the difference between the Southern African territory, listing territory, and the South African territories around the Prince Edward Islands. The morning of the 28th was when we left that EEZ around the Prince Edward Islands, made our way slowly but surely, longingly back to the mainland, wishing that we were back at Prince Edward or Marion Island, and eventually crossing back into South Africa's EEZ, bound for Durban. You can see here, thanks to Peter Hills. I'm not sure if Peter Hills is with us this evening, but he's also shared a route marker showing the various waypoints that he's logged on different days. So that's just a little bit about our routes, very much less traveled. And then moving on to the 24th, off we went after so much planning. Sorry, Melissa, you can go to the next slide. As you can see here, big open ocean. Hopefully the video is playing for everyone. There we were leaving Cape Town, everyone getting very excited, getting up onto deck 13 and 14. So this 14-story cruise ship. As I mentioned, some had to be brought on by tender boats. So MSC was very accommodating to make sure that everyone could get on board. But we obviously had to leave the Cape Town cruise terminal a little bit earlier to avoid that southeasterly picking up. And yeah, everyone holding onto their hats as we made our way out of the terminal, said goodbye to Cape Town and the tablecloth over Table Mountain, and out into the blue waters, as you can see on your top right. I hope that video is playing. It looks a bit jumpy to me. Might be because of the file size, it might be because of the internet speed. Cool. So the next slide, I think, Melissa. Right, and then a little bit on ship life. I know all of you have been wanting to see many pictures of what it was like on the ship. Really, you can see lots of keen photographers and lots of keen birders. About 1,500 passengers joined us, or guests joined us aboard the MSC Orchestra. In the middle top, you could see people really living their best life out at sea. Everyone's got chairs and just waiting for that first albatross to come, floating past, really. The first sunset on that first Monday really drew everyone out to the decks, of course. And decks were certainly quite packed. Obviously, we tried to keep COVID protocols as much as possible, masks on and distancing. This was definitely a challenge when wandering albatross or city albatrosses were flying past. And I'll touch more on the guides a little bit later, but you can see here on deck 7, which was a huge deck along the side of the MSC Orchestra. People would gather in en masse to listen to the guides point out various species. There you can also see a view from one of the cabins facing the sea. So if you're lucky enough to have a sea-facing cabin, that's what you would wake up to or go to sleep to. Some of the pictures of the birding life, if many of you might listen to the birding life podcast, there's some of the team there. And really the day would start very early, getting onto decks at sunrise when the birds were most active. Meal times were incredible, huge buffet selection when the birders weren't on the decks, and then sometimes off into the theatre for a vast array of lectures and talks around marine mammals, seabirding, etc. And we were very privileged to have a number of speakers on the cruise with us, and I'll touch on that as well shortly. So that's just a little bit of the ship life. The next slide also shows a fancy dress. Like I said, us birders didn't just go voyaging 2,000 kilometers towards Antarctica and back just to see birds. Obviously, that was the main cause. A little bit of fun was had as well with a fancy dress. So we had a bird party on the Wednesday night, and there were fancy dress prizes for those who dressed up as the best birds. There were almost every species that you could anticipate seeing on Flock to Marion was seen in the restaurant or around the decks dressed up. You can see there Paul from Singita, if any of you know Paul, on board with us. And at the bottom left, I had to include, just to show how cold and rainy it got on one of the days. It got very, very foggy, and everyone was dressed up in their KOAs. In the middle as well, Peter Harrison, we were very fortunate, which we'll touch on as well later. Peter Harrison auctioned off some of his artwork from his new Seabirds book, the new identification guide. And we were very, very lucky to be the beneficiaries of that auction. And then, of course, sunsets at sea. As I said, just this vast, deep blue ocean halfway between the South African mainland and the Prince Edward Islands. And Gaynor Watson Donovan has shared a really nice picture as well. This albatross sailing by next to our BirdLife flag, which looks pretty good in this picture, but by day 7 did get rather tattered. But we were very proud of that. And then we were very privileged to have a number of guides, in fact, about 40 guides join us on Flock to Marion. I'm not sure, where else you would find such an incredible wealth of knowledge all on one vessel. These guides were split between the bow, the stern, the port, the starboard, some terms which I'm still getting used to, terms that you don't want to mess up on a boat, because not only for safety reasons, but you might miss a wandering albatross if you don't know your starboard from your port. And these guides were located across many different decks 13, 7, 10, 12. So wherever you went on the vessel, you were fortunate enough to most likely bump into a guiding station. These guides also had radios, and what they would do is they would talk to each other to alert each other to different species. Many of you on the cruise will remember Andrew de Blok's voice ringing out over the PA system with the bird alerts, especially when those mega sightings were first seen. And we're very thankful to all of these guides, especially the time they put in. If I'm not mistaken, it was 5 in the morning until 6 p.m. On rotations, which were managed by Andrew and the team. And then every evening they would have a meeting to agree or sometimes disagree on certain species. And this feedback would then go into a species list that we kept daily, which we will show you as well. And these guides also joined Flock to Marion at no cost to BirdLife South Africa. So you can see some of the organizations listed at the bottom there, and the guides on stage on the final night. Really, really privileged. All of us were very privileged to enjoy the knowledge of these guides. Personally, there were many prines and petrels that I couldn't even see with the naked eye, and I had to rely on some of the guides to point them out. As I said, seabirding, a little bit a different kettle of fish to bushveld birding, trying to track these birds against the ocean swells. And if you're a new seabirder, then no doubt you benefited from these guides as well and their wealth of knowledge. And once you would go indoors, if you would go indoors, so when you weren't with the guides or on one of the decks enjoying the wealth of species, there were lectures in the theatre as well. So again, we were very, very lucky to benefit from a number of informative speakers. Peter Harrison, obviously, being our main guest of honor, the author of Seabirds, the new identification guide. Peter spoke to us a bit about his career at sea in general. His penguins talk was incredible, and one of his famous talks is Ocean Nomads, Albatrosses. And he gave a number of those talks on repeat to accommodate everyone in the theatre. Because of COVID restrictions, we could not accommodate everyone in the theatre for one talk. So he was kind enough to repeat his talks so that everyone could enjoy those. Peter Ryan also gave a talk on birds and the island ecology of Marion Island, which was very informative, particularly because we were going off to Marion. Dr. Anton Wolfart is the project manager of the Mouse-Free Marion project, one of the beneficiaries of this Flock to Marion, and we'll speak about that shortly. And he gave a talk about how they're going to go about saving Marion Island seabirds. We also had Professor Ken Findlay on board, and he touched on marine mammals of the Southern Ocean. And as I said, there was a wealth of knowledge on offer if you would be in the theatre, if you weren't up on the decks. Patricia Zurita is the CEO of BirdLife International, and sent through a video talk about BirdLife's 100 years this year. And then Daniel Dankberts from Rock Jumper Guiding also spoke about seabirds of the Western Indian Ocean. And then some of the BirdLife team, you can see on the bottom left, our BirdLife Seabirds team, Andrea, Alistair, Tegan, and Christina introduced us all to our bird of the year, which is the Cape Gannet, which we were lucky enough to see on the first day leaving Cape Town. And then we also had well-known pelagics guide Trevor Hardiker. Some of you might know Trevor from the South African Rare Birds News Forum. He also gave a workshop on photographing seabirds at sea, which is definitely a challenge if I look through my own camera roll. And then Dominic Rollinson also spoke to us about mitigating seabird bycatch, which is also something that Andrea and the team spoke about with our albatross task force. So as I mentioned, we were really lucky to have this lineup of speakers each evening, sometimes in the afternoon and late mornings. So when you weren't out on the decks enjoying the albatrosses, etc., there was a lot on offer inside the vessel as well. Thanks, Melissa. We were also very fortunate that Swarovski and Zeiss put up some prizes for competitions to help BirdLife South Africa recruit new Conservation League donors, as well as for the sponsor a hectare initiative that the Mouse Free Marion project is running. So thank you so much to those incredible donors, Swarovski and Zeiss, for putting up those binoculars. You can see at the top left, Charlene was the lucky winner. Charlene van der Slikke was the lucky winner of those Zeiss SF Victory 10x32 binoculars for signing up to become a Conservation League donor. So thank you to Charlene and to everyone else who also signed up to become a Conservation League donor. The sponsor hectare initiative, John Cranker on the top right there, won that pair of Swarovskis. That was a lucky draw for sponsoring a hectare or more than a hectare. And then George and Kathy Ledeck won an amazing limited edition artist's proof. They sponsored the most hectares, an incredible 200 hectares for the sponsor hectare initiative for Mouse Free Marion. And in return, they got an artist's proof from Peter Harrison's Seabird's book. And then there were 3 people who sponsored 100 hectares, at 1,000 Rand a hectare. That was Alex Barrell, John Bradshaw, and Jeff Ball. And because there were 3 of them, we had to do a lucky draw for the Seabirds, the new identification guide, which Peter Harrison kindly put up as a prize. And Alex Barrell's name came out of the hat, and Di Barrell, you can see, receiving the book on Alex's behalf. And we'll touch on funds raised as well. But as a result of all of these competitions and prizes that were generously put forward, we were able to raise a significant amount of money for the Mouse Free Marion project. Great, and now just so that I can have a sip of water, we thought there might be many of you who learned quite a bit on this cruise about seabirds, and we wanted to test who has been reading their copy of Peter Harrison's Seabirds book. So we've got 3 species that we wanted to test in the chat room. We could drop your answers in there. I also wanted to thank those who'd sent their pictures through. In this case, Mick Dryden, Johan Mock, and Roger McDonald. So we'll reveal the blurred images shortly, and in the chat room you can just drop your suspicions on what you think each of these birds are, and Andrew de Block will jump on and let us know the species, the answers, and why, or how to tell the difference between these different species.
Okay, I think we'll let everyone have a little chance to have a look and drop their answers in the chat room. Now we've unblurred the images. Yes, I see Gillian Hempel saying that images are very blurred. That was on purpose to let everyone have a go. I haven't seen any answers come through just yet. So certainly these were ID challenges on board, and as Andy mentioned, that's why the 40 expert guides were so important on the voyage. I've guided about 40 pelagics off of Cape Town, and still those birds out in the Southern Ocean are fairly tricky, and they all, some of them look very, very similar. So I was super impressed by some of the guides on board and the incredible expertise they brought. Right, I'm seeing the chat room is now being flooded. Brilliant. Everyone seems to have got A, and that is, as Alan Taylor says, a giant petrel. But I think the real question is which giant petrel. And of course, A is the northern giant petrel. I would say it's quite an old bird, judging by the white face and the white in the wings. But the giveaway, of course, is the color of the bill tip. I say, of course, like this is an obvious fact, but if you thought testiculars were bad, try viewing a giant petrel's bill tip at 300-400 meters from a moving boat. So that is a northern giant petrel. B, as most of you have indicated correctly, is an Indian yellow-nosed albatross. Of course, Indian and Atlantic pose an ID problem, but in this case, it's clearly an Indian with the all-white head, although I'd say it's a young-ish bird, given that it has some gray on the cheek underneath the eye. And then, of course, you can look at the bill and the shape of the feminicorn at the apex of the bill, and the yellow in the bill. And then C, most of you have obviously got right as well. The trick here would be, obviously, it's a great albatross with the all-white back as opposed to a dark back. And then you're looking at the secondary features, which would be the white in the wings, how much is it and where is it? And then the tail as well, of course. So you're looking at how much black is in the tail. This is a Tristan albatross. This is Roger MacDonald's fantastic picture of this very special species that we were able to see, and I think most people on board managed to see a Tristan albatross. There were 3 or 4 candidates. I think 2 of them were called quite confidently. The reason this would be a Tristan is the white in the wings has this sort of dotted effect on the elbows. So there's not a lot of white in the wings. It's just starting to show, and a wandering albatross would whiten from the scapulars, from the sort of edge of the back outwards. That much white in the wing, or that little white in the wing on a wandering albatross would mean it would have a completely black tail, whereas this one has only a little bit of white on the elbows rather than shoulders. And it's got this piano key pattern, which I think is a term that's been popularized by Peter Harrison, the sort of alternating black and white feathers in the tail. So that combination, it's not just, that's quite important to note, it's not just the keyboard pattern in the tail that gives us away as a Tristan albatross, but a combination of both the white in the wings from the elbows and the keyboard tail at this life stage of a male Tristan albatross is distinctive. And this is a revelation that's come out of Peter Harrison's new book, Seabirds, a New Identification Guide. So very, very special moment for many, many people on board to confidently tick off their first ever Tristan albatross. Thanks, Andy. I hope I did that justice.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And yeah, I can tell that people have definitely been reading either their Peter Ryan Seabirds book or their Peter Harrison Seabirds, a New Identification book. I know many people have purchased the book, and judging by the book signings, there were lots of fans on the cruise who went and got their book signed by Peter Harrison. So it looks like the homework has been done. Lots of good answers in this chat box. So moving on to the species list. So I know that everyone was very keen on the species list because first thing in the morning it was already being asked for. It certainly kept us busy. Andrew and his team did a fabulous job, as I mentioned, every evening with the guides. At the end of a long day of guiding on the deck, 6 o'clock off to supper, from supper off to the guides meeting. Sometimes a good hour or more was spent debating certain species. You know, did it have a white chin? Did it have 3 white dots to confirm a Tristan albatross? So those debates were definitely very, very interesting. I think I would have enjoyed to be in those rooms a few more. Certainly a lot was learned from those guides. But every evening we would update the species list, print it off the next morning, and we would put copies at the info desk and at the coffee station for the 5 o'clock, the early birds. And just an incredible list of species seen when you really look at it at the end of the day. I hope it's viewing all right for everybody. You can see what we did was tracked according to species, where it was seen. This was especially for the listers. So those of you who mark your species according to region, so South Africa versus Southern Africa, and obviously international or global waters. And just a reminder on that the essay indicates that it was seen in South African waters or sub-region. International was obviously between the EEZ, the exclusive economic zone, or the economic exclusive zone of South Africa. So that would have been in global waters before we crossed into the EEZ around the Prince Edward Islands. And many of you will know already that there is a marine protected area around the Prince Edward Islands. The team will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was about 20 kilometers, 12 miles around the islands that protect that area because of the sensitivity of the ecosystem. We obviously can't have mice and flies or anything like that, invertebrates making their way to the island. So that's the reason for the marine protected area. And that marine protected area falls within the EEZ around the islands, and listers were able to add species to their South Africa list as well, like I mentioned, that you definitely wouldn't see around the coast, the mainland coast. So that was marked as PEIs on this list, which is Prince Edward Islands. And then we did it by day so that people could actually see and use their camera and double check the species that they had seen according to day. And we've had a lot of feedback on this list and lots of interest and engagement. And I know Andrew also, on behalf of Andrew and myself, definitely like to thank those of you who've been in touch since the voyage. We've received quite a lot of feedback on some of the TBC species, which you'll see on the bottom right. There are a few that were still marked as TBC. This is because we didn't have photographic evidence, or we don't have photographic evidence as yet. So the guides meeting, the conclusion was to keep them as TBC, and those were a southern royal albatross, a Gentoo penguin, the South Georgian diving petrel, and the minke whale, or the mink whale. That said, there was an incredible array of species seen, as you can see by this very long species list. Personally, I didn't even know that all of these whales existed before this trip. I think I can count about 12 or 11 different species of whales, pilot whales, beaked whales, and incredibly a blue whale on 2 of the days. And I know that one couple, you'll see the picture shortly, actually saw this whale from their bedroom. And ironically, the story goes that they were about to go off to watch Ken Findley's presentation in the theatre, and they did send their apologies to Ken, and that they wouldn't make the talk, and they'd rather watch it from their bedroom. On the TVs in the bedroom, guests could tune into the talks in the theatre, and what a fateful decision that was, because while sitting watching Ken Findley talk about marine mammals on their TV screen, not 20 meters away, they saw a blue whale come out and say hello from their sea-facing room. So that's obviously a once-in-a-lifetime and an incredible privilege to see the planet's greatest mammal. Then some of the species as well that were surprised. I know Andrew will jump in here as well. He's far more knowledgeable on seabirds than I am, because there were a number of species that we did not expect to see, or at least did not expect to see in that area. I know Peter Harrison even mentioned that we were very, very lucky to have a Tristan albatross sighted so close to the South African mainland. On top of that, also a number of different petrels. I know people were very excited by the blue and the grey petrel. There was also, I'm sorry for the, seem to have lagged a bit. I'm not sure, forgive me for my internet connection. But giant manta rays as well, a green turtle, flying fish, obviously to keep the birders happy. The fish flew out of the water. We had mako sharks, and as I mentioned, I didn't know this many whale species existed. From a dolphin point of view, we had 6 different dolphin species following the MSC orchestra. I know the red phalarope was also quite a spot, but I'm going to hand over to Andrew to just talk us through the species list and some of the big lifers as well.
Thanks, Andy. I think pretty much from a species list point of view, we had almost a full house. There were a couple of bird species that we had put on as sort of peripheral possibilities, things like Barrow's petrel, which we didn't see, and a couple of others, sort of boobies and frigate birds. But on the whole, the species that we thought we had at least a reasonable to moderate chance of seeing, we saw. And usually, in the case of these species, we saw a few individuals, which is obviously always a pleasure. Those that didn't get onto the first one had a chance to see the second one. Andy, this is probably coming as a surprise to you, given that I received this information this morning, but it seems we can add another species to the list, that being Kerguelen petrel, which has been sort of retrospectively recorded in people's photographs. So I had someone list that on eBird today, and Daniel Dankwitz, my second in command with the guides, sent through that confirmation to me today, so we can actually add Kerguelen petrel to our species list, although there weren't many people that got to see it. I think there were 3 of them on deck at the time. So even now we're uncovering various species, and I know many people are still pouring through photographs of things like prions, trying to turn up broad-billed and slender-billed and salvins and Arctic and separate them all off. And I'd encourage you to keep posting those in the Flock to Marion Facebook group. And I think from the marine mammal point of view, Andy, I was likewise also blown away by the diversity we had. And I'd like to just draw one particular mammal to everyone's attention, which I think is a rough-toothed dolphin. If I've got that correct, I can't quite read it with the small print here. It was seen on the last day coming into Durban on the last day before we docked. And this was a first ever live record for rough-toothed dolphin in southern African waters. The previous records had all been strandings of carcasses, and this is the first time ever that it's been photographed at sea. So not only were the bird records phenomenal, and I think most people got onto most species, whereas on previous flocks, for instance, there was one light-mantled albatross that a lot of people missed. On this trip, everyone saw a light-mantled albatross if you were out on deck, and the marine mammals basically almost outperformed the birds, but I will say almost, because I still think I'm biased. So back to you, Andy.
Thanks, Andrew. And I see there's a question from Roy McGrath around what date and time did we enter and leave South African waters around the Prince Edward Islands. So again, Andrew will correct me if I'm wrong, Roy, but to give you an idea, obviously not necessarily down to the second, but we left South African waters on the 25th of January. So that was the Tuesday morning, just before midday, so 11:40 a.m. We woke up in South African waters again on the 30th of January, so on our way back to Durban. The 27th of January until 6:40 a.m. And then on the 28th of January, we were in that Prince Edward Islands EEZ, so the South African waters. So I'll just clarify that again, because I know that there are many viewers who were asking this so that they could log their species accordingly. So that's 11:40 a.m. on the 25th of January. We left South African waters. We were then in international waters until the 27th of January. At 6:40 a.m. on the 28th of January, we left the Prince Edward Islands, EEZ, back into international waters, and then crossed back into South African waters, where you would have listed Southern African species or your Southern African list, if you're that way inclined, on the 30th of January, when we woke up on the 30th of January. So I hope that answers your question. And yeah, it's very exciting that we can add that species. I think, Andrew, that might bring the list to 90 species. As Andrew mentioned, it was almost a full house when you compare that to the list of species that were covered in the pre-webinar, the pre-flock webinars, the species webinars. So really incredible to have uncovered that really, really comprehensive species list. Speaking of species, again, thank you so much to many contributors. We had hundreds and hundreds of photos. Obviously, many of them have also been submitted on the Flock to Marion Facebook page. So if this doesn't satisfy the craving this Tuesday night, we've got the Flock to Marion Facebook page where you can go to your heart's content and scroll through that feed. There are some really incredible photographs that have been shared. Also look out for an album in the African BirdLife issue coming out, the May-June issue. So there will be a portfolio of seabirds from Flock to Marion from a number of contributors in the African BirdLife edition coming out, the May-June issue, which will come out towards the end of April. I see Christina is also replying in the chat about when we left the various waters for the benefit of everyone there. So thanks to these contributors. These were just some of the species seen. Like Andrew said, there was a number of different photographs that have been coming in that have helped us ID some of the species. You can see here Mick Dryden, David Hall, Roger McDonald, and Richard Gee. I see Richard Gee's image is not displaying so well. It must be there in the middle. Yes, very lucky to see king penguins. I thought maybe this was the blue whale photo, but I think that's coming up next, which was also Richard Gee. And then, yeah, just some incredible pictures from Jody. Really enjoyed Ali Ditchfield's takeoff snapshot of that wandering albatross taking off. That was after it had actually hunted down a squid, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if Ali is with us, or anyone who knows Ali's photo sequence is welcome to correct me in the chat box, but she had a really great sequence of photos of this albatross catching a squid and then taking off afterwards. A great shot from Sean as well of that macaroni penguin, if I'm not mistaken, caught in mid-air, porpoising out of the sea. And then surely one of the shots of the trip, Roger McDonald with the Indian yellow-nosed albatross, still working out my Indian versus Atlantic yellow-nosed albatross, but I think this is an Indian yellow-nosed albatross, going after a white-chinned petrel, which is in turn going after a squid. So pretty incredible. That all of this was seen from the decks of the MSC orchestra from our vantage point on high. A really nice brown and subantarctic skua by Johan Mock. Again, I speak under correction. Seabirding is very new to me, or was very new to me a few weeks ago. And then I mentioned that blue whale coming up just next to the bedroom. If I'm not mistaken, Richard Gee sent this through on somebody's behalf. And as I mentioned, they had turned down the lecture with Ken Findley quite faithfully to have this sighting from their cabin. Pretty incredible. So those are just some of the species, as I mentioned, the bird scene and some of the great photographs taken. If you want to see some more, head over to the Facebook page. Yeah, you can scroll to your heart's content. Speaking of species and the different territories that we list them in, Christina mentioned the SA Listers Club. So this is exclusively a South Africa Listers Club. That is the borders of South Africa and the EEZ. I think it's around 200 kilometers off the shore. So please come and join us. Come and join the South Africa Listers Club on the BirdLife website. You could email your totals through and our team will update them. We've recently introduced these badges, these milestone badges. You can see there's the 300 up to 700 badges. Quite incredibly, John, if I'm not mistaken, get the name for you now. John Glendinning. Yeah, thanks, Andrew. John Glendinning crossed the 800 species mark. So we'll definitely have to look into something to mark that occasion. And the Listers Club really is just to keep that opportunity of adding lifers to your South Africa list. It's a great initiative. You can also buy these badges on our shop, shop.birdlife.org.za. And naturally, the reason we had to bring up the SA Listers Club was Flock to Marion was really a completely unique experience to go out to those South African waters around the Prince Edward Islands and add a number of milestones and species and lifers to our respective lists. So head on over to the SA Listers Club if you're keen to join. It starts at the 300 marks. Once you've crossed the 300 mark, please send through your totals, and we look forward to seeing you climb that list on the SA Listers Club website. And then another prompt for the chat room. So, I've showed you a number of amazing species. Tell us what your top sighting was, and especially what lifers you may have added to your list. I know there were a few people crossing different milestones, the 300, 500, 700 mark. And as we mentioned, John Glendinning crossing that 800 mark. So please share any special sightings you had with us and with your fellow flockers in the chat box, and especially what those lifers were. I know some of you have also done all 3 flocks previously, and so many of you maybe only got a few extra lifers out towards Marion, as opposed to off the coast of South Africa. Great, and then the next slide is just some favorite moments. I hope the video is going to play all right for everyone. But speaking of the different species seen and hearing of those favorite moments and those memories, we chatted to a few people around the ship. And so Melissa, if you could take it away, and hopefully it plays all right.
We're really excited about being on this trip. It's our first time on a big cruise ship like this. It's even better to be surrounded by bird watchers.
It's been fantastic. I love the Southern Ocean, and I'll go back into it any day and bring on those penguins and those albatrosses because they're wonderful.
I'd do it again tomorrow.
Is this your first vlog?
No, I was on the one last time.
What's been your highlight this time?
Getting close to Marion, but bird-wise probably the light mantles.
I think it's just been the most world-class, life-changing experience. We're fairly new to birding, and to have seen what we saw around Marion was just, I think it'll stay with us forever. It's been incredible.
Yeah, no, really once in a lifetime experience. I'd love to be able to do it again and have the opportunity to go into the Roaring Forties. It was an amazing experience and we would cherish it forever.
Andy, sorry,
Thanks,
you're on
Melissa.
mute.
Sorry about that. Thanks. And I particularly wanted to also send out thanks on top of the photographs that were sent, the contributions. One person in particular helped us so much around the ship with capturing these videos, and me especially from a communications point, and that was Roger O'Neill from KZN. If I'm not mistaken, Roger was on his third flock, so a very, very loyal flocker or flocky. And Roger helped us with some of the videography around the ship, and many of you would have seen him running around with his camera. And so thanks so much to Roger and his wife. He spent a lot of time. He was actually a guest on Flock to Marion, but he still put his hand up to help us and running around the ship and actually working and taking videos when he was meant to be on holiday. So some of these videos are courtesy of Roger. The next one really for me was special, a very special opportunity to deal with Peter Harrison on a one-on-one basis and to speak to him, and in this case to do a video asking him his thoughts. And those of you who were privileged to see Peter speak in the theatre, he drew many of the crowd to tears. He's just got a special way about him, and you know, when the world's most renowned, probably top seabirder in the world has what he has to say in this video, then it really gives you a sense of Flock to Marion and just what an amazing opportunity it was. And he says it was one of the high points of his entire life. So I'm going to let Melissa play the video for you.
Well, as far as albatrosses are concerned, I think everybody that has ever met me knows that albatrosses are my #1 love in birds. And the reason is quite simple. They are the largest flying birds, they're the oldest birds that live on the planet, and they're also the most itinerant birds. An average albatross in a lifetime of some 50 years or so will fly a staggering 8.5 million kilometers. And to put that into perspective, that's something like 12 round-trip journeys to the moon and back. They have wonderful habits in their life, one of them being that they're very monogamous. Unlike humans, the divorce rate is only 2% per annum. So these birds, the albatrosses, are the ocean wanderers. There's nothing quite like an albatross to get the blood going, and on this particular voyage, Flock to Marion, we have been so blessed. Never in our wildest dreams could we ever have imagined that we would look out over Prince Edward Island on a misty grey day, the Southern Ocean just rolling past the ship, and we would have something like 300 or maybe even 400 albatrosses in the air together. I've been at sea well over 50 years, but let me tell you, on the morning of Prince Edward Island, looking out at those albatrosses, 7 or 8 species no less, was one of the high points of my entire life. Days just don't get better than Flock to Marion.
Thanks so much, Melissa. And you know, Peter didn't just make himself available for interviews like this and talks on the stage in the theatre, but he was also out on the decks, seen every day as a guide. He put on his guide jacket and he was there guiding people through the differences between Tristan and wandering albatrosses. So that was a special privilege. He also, as I mentioned, put forward many books and artists' proofs up for prizes and for auction that BirdLife South Africa and the Mastery Marion project are the beneficiaries of. And so we are incredibly thankful of Peter and Shirley for not only participating in the voyage, making it all the way across from the States to the UK, from the UK to South Africa, through all the COVID testing, onto the ship, and then really put in so much to Flock to Marion. He even did book signings and as I mentioned, talks and the guiding on deck. So thank you so much to Peter and Shirley and Apex Expeditions. And as I mentioned, when the world's top seabird, I spoke to Peter and I think he said he thinks every seabird there is to see in the world except one or maybe two in the China area. When he has that to say that, you know, it was one of his top albatross days ever, it just really goes to show what an incredible day that Albatross Thursday, as it's become known, was for so many people. Onto the next slide. Speaking of bird guides, we also wanted to thank so many of you watching tonight who helped sponsor or donate the fees or the funds for 8 community bird guides, 8 BirdLife South Africa community bird guides who joined us on Flock to Marion. For most of them, it was their first time on a cruise ship, first time out at sea, and first time seeing most of these species. I'm going to let the bird guides also tell you themselves in the video on the top right, but we wanted to especially thank Swarovski Optic for their continued support of the Community Bird Guides project, and Weiler Distributors, and those of you who contributed the funds to allow these 8 community bird guides to go on Flock to Marion with us. So we spoke to a few of the bird guides and we thought we'd play you their thoughts.
My name is Sakamuzi Mhlongo from Zululand. It's one of the best trips I ever did because I spend most of my time guiding in the forest, in the grassland, in the wetland areas. So to be in the sea, it's a wonderful experience.
Yeah, my name is Juliet Kabela. I come from Zululand. Trained by BirdLife South Africa, and I've been guiding for over 17 years. You know, it's an amazing experience, and we have seen quite a few lifers, and actually it's my second time. I went on the one in 2013, which was from here, from Cape Town to Walvis Bay, and this is actually my second time now and experiencing this amazing journey.
My name is Mabui Zungu. It's been a good experience. Thanks to BirdLife South Africa for giving us this opportunity, and thanks to Soraki and all the sponsors who brought us here in the cruise. It's what an experience. Thank you guys very much for everything that you've done for us. And today I've got new babies from Soraki. Oh, I'm very, very happy. I'm very, very happy. Thank you.
Hello everybody, I'm Sifundo Kumbi, Zululand Bird Guide. I'm here, Flock to Marion Island in 2022. Yeah, so far so good for me. First time doing a pelagic, first time on the cruise. Got 5 lovers so far. Maybe I'm going for 30. That's my target. And also, I went to the lecture of Peter Harrison. Hey, you missed out big time, guys, when at home. I'm enjoying it really much. Thank you.
This is David Litswalo from Limpopo, Mapua. I'm on the Flock to Marion Island. I would really like to thank everyone who made it possible. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I've had a lot of fun, still enjoying myself. I've seen on every bit which I've seen on this trip has been new. I've enjoyed a lot the albatrosses, really the amazing birds which I've never thought in my life I'll never be able to see one of them, and not forgetting to see the grey-backed storm petrel. Really these amazing birds flying just over the water, and yeah, there's been a lot of things which I've seen and I'm still enjoying them, hoping to learn more about them.
Maybe Andy, I can just jump in. I think there was a wonderful selection of videos. Thank you for playing. As most of you will know, the community bird guides are under my sort of umbrella at BirdLife South Africa, and it was just incredible to see the response from the birding community in helping to get these guides on board. There were such a wide number of donors. Most of you are named here. There were a lot of anonymous donations as well. as well as MSC Cruises contributing towards the inclusion of the 8 community bird guides that came with us. And I was just recently this weekend in Zululand, and I was with Sakamuzi Mhlongo, and he just couldn't stop talking about what an incredible trip Flock to Marion was. So please don't underestimate the incredible experience that you made possible for these guides. It really is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for all of us, but would certainly be outside of their reach. And as Andy said, special notice or special note for Swarovski Optic, who came on board and also gave out 4 new pairs of Swarovski Optic binoculars to the guides that were on board that didn't already have Swarovskis. So incredible support of BirdLife South Africa and the community bird guides. And thanks again to everyone who made it possible.
Thanks. Thanks, Andrew. Before we hear from the project manager of the Mastery Marion project, I just wanted to preface this by saying, you know, as I mentioned in the beginning, we didn't just go on this unprecedented voyage halfway across the oceans to the Prince Edward Islands to see incredible species and for camaraderie between our birding community. Those are obviously good enough reasons in themselves, if you ask me. But there was a bigger reason, a more important reason for this Flock to Marion, and that is the Mastery Marion project. And those of you who were on board the Flock to Marion would have heard much about the Mastery Marion project, but for those of you who haven't, it's an incredible conservation initiative, probably one of the most important bird conservation projects that BirdLife South Africa has ever been involved in and maybe will ever be involved in. I'll let Anton tell you the reasons for the Mastery Marion project, but just to give you a short summary, 18 of the 28 seabirds that breed on Marion Island are at threat of local extinction. And this is because of the unnatural introduction of house mice. The mice are threatening those 18 of 28 species. And in one case, the wandering albatross is about 50% of the world's breeding population of wandering albatross breed on Marion Island. And so if we don't get this problem under control, we stand to lose wandering albatrosses locally, but also internationally, and many of those other species certainly locally, definitely within our lifetimes. And so the Mastery Marion project is a very important initiative, and I'll hand over to Anton to explain it in more detail.
Mice were accidentally introduced to Marion Island some 200 years ago in the early 1800s. And for many years, the mice were known to have an impact on the terrestrial invertebrates and vegetation of the island and were undermining many of the ecological processes. And relatively recently, in the early 2000s, it became apparent that the mice had now resorted to starting to kill seabird chicks and eggs. And this has increased in intensity and frequency and scale to the extent that mice are now considered to be a major threat to the future of the seabird populations on Marion Island. And this is exacerbated by impacts of climate change, because as the climate has become warmer and drier, these are more favorable conditions for mice, which have led to a longer breeding season and increased densities of mice, which have led to further reductions in the invertebrate prey resource and them resorting increasingly to feeding on seabirds, eggs and chicks. And research on Marion has shown that the majority, probably 18 of the 28 species of seabirds that breed on Marion Island, are likely to face local extinction if the mice are not removed. So it's really important that we remove those mice from Marion Island, and the only way that we are able to do so is by applying a rodenticide bait to the island. And given the size of the island, the only technique that we can use to do that is to apply that bait aerially by means of helicopters. So there have been many operations that have preceded ours that have done this at both a smaller scale and a larger scale, and these operations have provided us with insights and lessons and experience that we can use to plan the operation for Marion Island. It is a challenging operation because the island is large, it's remote. The operation will be done during a time when the weather conditions are very inclement, but we know that it can be done. A feasibility study has demonstrated that this is technically feasible. A number of risks have been identified that we have identified and we are planning to mitigate. So we have every confidence that we can succeed in this very important operation. because of the logistics involved, it's very costly to undertake an operation like this. It's a once-off operation, so although it requires a fairly large initial investment, the rewards are massive, and the rewards are essentially rewards that last in perpetuity. So we would urge all people that are interested in the future of Marion Island and the conservation of its seabirds to help support the project. We're aiming to undertake the baiting operation in 2024, but in order to do that, we need to raise a significant amount of funds, and we'd be very grateful if you could visit our website on www.mousefreemarion.org and consider sponsoring a hectare or more towards this important cause. It really will make a huge difference to this really important island and the remarkable seabirds that call it home.
Thanks for playing that through, Melissa, and thanks to Anton in his absence. Anton and Mark Anderson, the CEO of BirdLife South Africa, are actually currently meeting on the Mouse Marion Management Committee meeting. Lots of important work, as you've heard, to be done, and not lots of time to do it in. So they tendered their apologies and couldn't make it this evening to tell you more about the project, and hence have sent through a video. Similarly, Mark has also sent us a video, and he will touch a little bit more on the achievement and the success of Flock to Marion, as well as the funds raised. So I'll let him talk to that. But before we do that, as you can see, quite an unprecedented voyage all the way to the sub-Antarctic, the Southern Ocean. An incredible list of species seen, somewhere in the region of 90 now, with that Kerguelen's petrel, I think it was, that Andrew added. Incredible species seen for so many people, and as Mark will tell you about the funds raised, an incredible amount of funds raised towards a very important bird conservation program. And all of this during a global pandemic. And just when we thought we had seen the end of COVID, and we had diarized the 24th of January 2022, of course, it wasn't over just yet, and we had that Omicron variant make it quite a complicated December for many of us as well, and went ahead with Flock to Marion anyway, and what a trip it was. So we have entered Flock to Marion into the South Africa Tourism Awards. We appreciate any support we can get. You can see that we are tailing Graskorp Gorge Lift Company, which is an amazing experience in itself, but we do believe that Flock to Marion was a very unique experience, and we'd like to highlight this in the South Africa Tourism Awards. So I'll drop the link in the chat box shortly, unless someone beats me to it. And anyone who enjoyed the experience as much as we enjoyed it and enjoyed having you, if you could go through and cast your vote and help us out, help us climb that leaderboard. Yeah, so that's it from the voting point of view, and I'll drop the link in the chat room. Otherwise, I'd like to conclude with hearing from Mark Anderson, the BirdLife CEO, BirdLife South Africa CEO.
Good evening, everyone. This is a recorded message as I cannot attend tonight's webinar. I'm chairing the Mouse Free Marion Management Committee meeting, and these meetings are held in the evenings to accommodate differences in time zones, as Keith Springer, our operations manager, is based in New Zealand, and Heidi Whitman, our Chief Philanthropy Officer, is based in California. I'm pleased to report that the Mouse Free Marion team is hard at work, and important progress is being made with this globally important bird conservation project. BirdLife South Africa is exceptionally pleased that Flock to Marion was a success. We're very grateful for the positive feedback we've received from many of our passengers. It was not an easy voyage to pull off, and it was years in the making. The voyage was postponed because of COVID and almost thwarted on the day of departure by a gale force southeasterly wind, which resulted in the port being closed to large ships. Despite being a conservation organization with our efforts focused on protecting threatened bird species and conserving important habitats, BirdLife South Africa also organizes large and successful events, such as the African Bird Fair and Flocks at Sea. Considerable amount of work went into organizing the different aspects of Flock to Marion, and the team of staff and volunteers worked very hard to ensure that every small detail was attended to. It was a massive team effort, and I commend our organizing committee for their hard work, for their professionalism, and for their commitment. A special word of thanks is also due to MSC Cruises South Africa, and especially to its managing director, Ross Falk. The past few years have not been easy for the tourism and hospitality industries, Despite the challenges, the team at MSC did all they could to ensure that Flock to Marion was a success. We're also grateful to the guides and the lecturers who shared their expertise and knowledge during the voyage, and to Swarovski and Zeiss for joining us in the MSC orchestra. About 5 million rand was raised during Flock to Marion for the Mouse-Free Marion project and for BirdLife South Africa's important conservation work. I don't think ever in a single event have we raised as much money. So we're very grateful to everyone for their support. Funding is not easy to come by, especially during the current times. So we thank everybody for making generous donations during the Flock to Marion voyage. The Mouse-Free Marion project is one of the world's most important bird conservation projects, and we need support. Please sponsor a hectare or sponsor several hectares, tell a friend about the project, or contact us if you know of somebody who may be prepared to make a large donation. We appreciate the support of the 1,500 passengers who joined us in the once-in-a-lifetime voyage to the Southern Ocean. Thanks for your participation, and also to all of you who made donations during the voyage. Like me, I'm sure that we will never forget Albatross Thursday and the sight of wandering albatrosses gliding effortlessly above the Southern Ocean swells. So finally, where next? All I can say is that discussions are already taking place, so watch this space. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah, thanks to Mark for that synopsis, and yeah, for chairing that meeting and getting that conservation project going. And just the last thanks from my side to everyone, and especially to those who did join us on Flock to Marion, for the belief from the very beginning. You know, in extreme times and pandemics, as we mentioned, there was a lot of patience and belief that was shown right through to the very, very, very last moment, through all the hoops we had to jump to make it a possibility, get to the docks and actually get on the ship, to the final moment when we waved Table Mountain goodbye and Captain Pinto of the MSC Orchestra fired up those engines, making the Flock to Marion a huge success and a reality after many years of planning and dreaming about such an event. And as Mark said, watch this space. We can't give anything away just yet because there's still a lot of discussion on the go, but we can definitely say watch this space for the next edition of Flock at Sea. So thank you so much to the hosts for having me. I don't think it's possible to do justice to Flock to Marion virtually via a webinar. It was an incredible experience, truly life-changing, but I hope I've managed to do a little bit of justice through photographs and videos, and just thanks again to everyone for attending, and over to the hosts, over to Melissa again. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you, Andy. My goodness, what a lot of effort you put into that incredible slideshow, and certainly brought back so many memories for me personally. And I know Andrew and Christina, I'm sure, will be nodding their heads vigorously, moving through all of those slides and just remembering. And I think that video you played of some of the passengers who just shared what a touching experience this had been for them. I'm sure every single person who had the privilege of being out there watching those birds was moved and forever changed. So thank you, Andy. I think you did a phenomenal job of summarizing a truly magical experience. And I think anybody who wasn't on that boat is going to be first in line for the next one. So I'm very glad to hear there's another one coming. I will certainly be in that queue. Christina, from your side, I know we haven't really had a chance to hear from you. Do you want to share some of your final comments around it? I know we have run a bit late tonight, but I think everyone will forgive us.
Yeah, it has certainly brought back some good memories, and I hope it has for everyone who was able to join us, and for those of you who weren't, I hope it's whet your appetite for what's to come, hopefully. I certainly really enjoyed this Flock to Marion trip. I've been on all three. I've been lucky enough to be on all three Flock at Seas, and this one was definitely the best. And nothing can compare with that Albatross Thursday, and just for me seeing the penguins and being down in the Southern Ocean. So it really was an incredible trip, and also to have the added meaning of the raising funds for the Mouse-Free Marion project, which is, as we've said, such an important conservation project that we are trying to undertake. So yeah, thanks very much, Andy, for putting that together, and yeah, just helping us relive some amazing memories.
Absolutely. And Andrew, from your side, any closing sentiments?
Yeah, thanks again, Andy. You've done an incredible job at jogging our memories. Life moves on so quickly, although Flock was only 5 weeks ago, or 6 weeks ago. I can't even do the maths at this time of night, but an incredible experience, and you captured it incredibly well. So thanks for joining Conservation Conversations. I think it was a very worthwhile webinar, and I would just like to pay tribute to the broader organizing committee at BirdLife South Africa, who worked literally for years to pull this off, and it wasn't without its challenges between changes of ship, changes of ports, COVID, the permit, and all the ordeal that came with that. And then all of putting this together in basically 3.5, 4 months after we got the green light from government to run cruises again. So number one, the organizing committee did an incredible job being behind the scenes. And on that committee, I know how stressful it was. I know to many people it appeared to be a very slick and stress-free operation, but I can tell you that a lot of blood, sweat and tears went into making this happen. So thank you to them. And chief in that is Mark Anderson, of course, our CEO, who chairs that organizing committee, and then also MSC Cruises, as Mark said. It's been a torrid 3 years for MSC Cruises, and they really went out of their way to make Flock Marion happen as basically their marquee event for the season. So thank you to them, and we look forward to extending that incredible partnership into the future with future Flock at Seas.
Fantastic. Thank you, team. I think we have certainly run long into the night. Andy, phenomenal presentation. Thank you for all the hard work you put into that. And I see many, many comments coming through in the chat room. Keep them coming. We'll leave the webinar open as you guys share your final thoughts. And yeah, as Andrew said, I can only echo what Andrew shared. Massive thank you to the organizing committee for the many, many sleepless nights that you all went through, but well worth it. We are privileged to have experienced what we did. And with that, I think I will bid everyone a very good night. Keep those eyes on the skies, keep enjoying those birds. And as always, we will see you same time, same place next week, Tuesday. We have a very, very exciting, oh, sorry, not next week, Tuesday. I'm lying. Oh, I've gotten way too into my pilot mode here. Don't forget, everybody, we will not be here next Tuesday. Go and watch YouTube. We will unfortunately, well, fortunately for us, unfortunately for all of you, be down in De Hoop, hopefully getting a chance to see the incredible work that Christina's been up to with her penguins, potentially. But we'll be down with our annual BirdLife South Africa staff meeting for the first time, seeing our colleagues in what has been a very, very long time. So we'll be back in 2 weeks' time, and we will be joined by the incredible David Allen, who is no stranger to the show. And he's going to be talking to us about the Lesotho Highlands. So do join us in 2 weeks' time, and we will see you back here on the 22nd of March. Thank you, team. Good night, everybody, and stay safe and keep those comments coming. Cheers, everyone.